Hello, my name is Jonathan Harris from Worldwide Camera Exchange. Rolleiflex cameras. I've done another video talking through the various features on these cameras. What this video is going to be about is buying one of these cameras on the second-hand market. 50 years old, at least, you've got to be careful when you're buying them because as with anything of that sort of age, you can have problems. But with a bit of care, if you know what to look for, you know what to check, you should be able to get a very nice camera for relatively sensible money that will serve you for a long time to come. The checks I'm going to talk about now would really cover most Rolleiflex and actually most Rolleicord cameras as well. I'm showing you here a 3.5F. The checks I'm talking about will apply just as much to the early cameras that date back to the early 50s, late 1940s as they do to this. This camera actually probably dates 71, 72, so in Rolleiflex terms is actually quite new. Three things to look out for. Look at the cosmetics, look at the mechanics, and look at the optics. It's important to study all three areas carefully, particularly the cosmetics. If the cosmetics are tatty, if it's a tatty camera, I'd walk away. It doesn't really matter how cheap it is. If it's really tatty, the chances are you will be buying into a whole lot of trouble, and nobody wants that. With the mechanics can be sorted. That's not so much of an issue, but obviously there's a cost. With the optics, again, issues with optics can be resolved, but it's very, very expensive. So run through these three areas, look at the cosmetics, look at the mechanics, look at the optics. Bear in mind that mechanical issues can be sorted. Obviously you can do nothing about a camera being tatty, and obviously it's very expensive to do anything about the optics. So bear that in mind as I'm just running through this. Okay, so cosmetics, a lot of it is really common sense. This particular camera isn't just in astonishingly good condition. If you look at the top here, all the black paint on the viewfinder, make sure that's clean. You're not likely to find one that's spotless. You're more than likely to see a little bit of metal showing through on the corners. You'll probably see a little bit of metal showing through on the corners here on the Rolleiflex plate. That's all perfectly normal. What you don't want to see are nasty dents, and you don't want to see excessive marking. Look on the bottom corners, make sure there are no nasty dents on the bottom corners. These are quite prone. The back here is actually, it's not that solid, and it's quite common to see these little feet, these four little feet here are actually out of alignment. If somebody bangs one of these on a desk, you can actually bend these little feet out of alignment quite easily. So check that. Check the corners around the fronts and around the front stand of the camera here again. Make sure there's not excessive wear. A few little marks, don't worry too much. Avoid the heavily used stuff. Look at the cosmetics, and if you're happy that it's in relatively clean condition, then I'll move on to look at the mechanics. These are mechanical cameras. If they haven't been used for a long time, if they haven't been serviced, the chances are they won't work. Mechanical cameras do need to be serviced, and they do need to be serviced regularly. So if you're buying one of these off a photographer that's not used it since the 1990s, the chances are it will need to be serviced, so factor that into your price. The most obvious thing to be to show that a service is needed is the shutter. Just wind the camera on like that. Use the dials here to set it to the slow speed. Set it down to 1 second, then just fire the shutter. When it fires on 1 second, you'll expect to hear the shutter open, then you'll expect to hear the timing, and then you'll expect to hear the shutter close. If you don't hear that, if you just hear the thing clicking once and then jamming open, you can be fairly confident that there's a fault with the shutter. I don't know how well you can hear this. Now that's now set on 1 second. You can probably see it at the front as well. If I fire that, you can see the shutter's opening, the shutter's closing. You can hear the timing mechanism doing what the timing mechanism does. Do that and just make sure it's a fairly consistent noise. It shouldn't stutter, it shouldn't stay open, it shouldn't close prematurely. You're not actually timing the shutter. What you're doing is just making sure it is operating consistently. Try on a second, and then go down to half a second, go down to a quarter of a second, and just make sure all those speeds work as well. Again, you're not timing it, but you can hear it's faster. And you can see by looking into the front that it's opening and closing. Go all the way to a 500th, open the back, look through from the back, and then just fire it on a 500th of a second. What you'll see is just a little flash of light. When you fire the shutter, if you see no light at all, the shutter's not opening, so again it needs to be serviced. You're not timing it at a 500th, but if you can see it's opening at a 500th, you can be fairly sure that the shutter speeds down from a 500th down to a second will be fairly reliable. Also look at the aperture. As you fire the shutter, you'll see the aperture. Just close it down here to make sure it's closing down as you'd expect it to do. If the shutter's working well, the next thing I'll look at is the focusing. The focusing is just here on this knob here. You'll see as I turn that, it just racks out the front standard of the camera. It's a relatively basic system. It should be smooth. It should go from infinity to minimum focus without getting overly tight. Make sure all of this here is parallel. Make sure the edge of the front standard is parallel with the edge of the camera. Sometimes you'll see there being knocks, and you'll see that this little silver line here, the black isn't parallel. You'll see that there's a wedge shape of silver just where it's been knocked and come out of alignment. If that's happened, it's probably tight on the focusing as well. If the focusing is overly tight, it can be serviced, but just make sure it's had no nasty knocks. You also check out the depth of field preview. There's a little white bar there. As you move the aperture, you'll see the little depth of field preview moves. Make sure that's working. Make sure that all these knobs here are working. Again, they shouldn't be overly tight. They should all be moving smoothly. This is a non-meter camera. If it had a meter, I'd check the meter's working. Just make sure the meter is needle, which will be down here. Make sure that's flicking as it should as you shade the little meter. There's not a meter sensor there. Just put your finger over it, shade the sensor. You'll see the meter working. Compare it to your handheld meter. Compare it to a digital SLR. Don't expect it to be exactly the same. They never will be. But it should be close. It should be within half a stop or so. So make sure the meter's working there. Always run a film through. It's useful to run a film through. I mean, a film won't show you every issue you might encounter, but do run a film through if you can. That is likely to highlight any mechanical issues with the shutter and with the focusing. So once you've looked at all of that, if you're happy with it mechanically, then I would just move on to checking the optics. Open the waist level finder. Make sure that opens properly. Often if they've been knocked, and these are relatively fragile, if they've been knocked, you'll find it doesn't open really consistently and doesn't snap open like that one does. Just have a look at the screen. If you're looking at a camera where you can take the viewfinder off, take the viewfinder off. That's those two little buttons there. And again, you can see the screen there much more closely. I won't do it now, but if you pull this metal frame back, you can actually remove the screen. If you take the screen out, you'll see a mirror underneath. There's a mirror just there that allows you to see through the top viewing lens. Have a look at that mirror, make sure it's clean, make sure there's no fungus, make sure there's no scratching. Fungus looks like it's a little spot. It looks like spider's legs growing out from central point. If you see that, that's a serious issue. That can be a real problem to get cleaned. If it's just on the mirror, that's not too bad. But if it's on the mirror, the chance are it'll also be on the lens. So check out the lenses. Look into the lenses, look through the lenses as best you can. You can open the back, open the shutter up on T, you can lock it open, so you can actually look through the lens from the back like this. Shine a light through it, make sure there's no misting inside, make sure there's no fungus inside. I will put a link up as well that it explains more about fungus. That's something you really should know about because it's a real issue with these cameras. As I said, a bit of fungus on the mirror down there, not so much of an issue. But if you've got fungus or misting in either of the lenses, that's a problem. That can be really expensive to get sorted out. This is why it's really important to check the optics as well. So make sure the optics are nice and clear. Again, a test film will show you that it's focusing on infinity, but a test film won't show you've got fungus in the lens. It tends not to affect performance unless it gets to a really bad state, in which case you'll never get it cleaned anyway. So check both the lenses, the top and the bottom lens, for fungus. I know you don't take pictures through the top lens, but you still want it clean, because if you've got fungus in the top lens, the chances are it will eventually find its way down to the bottom lens as well. So that's the optics. You've checked the optics, you've checked the lenses, you've checked the screen, make sure that's clean, you've checked the mirror underneath the screen. You can also just check the little magnifier there. A little bit of marking on that's not the end of the world, because you can clean that quite easily. So you've checked the glass. You've checked the mechanics, you've made sure that the shutter's working well, you've checked the cosmetics, you know it's in nice condition, it hasn't been abused, you've run a film through and you've got some decent sharp pictures, well exposed, it's focusing in infinity, that's fantastic. If it's passed all those checks, you can be fairly confident you've got a good, reliable camera. Always buy from a source where you can return the camera if you have to, so you get a chance to carry out these checks. And always, as I said right at the beginning of the video, always bear in mind that you may have to get one of these serviced at some point. Servicing costs in the UK, £150, perhaps £180 plus VAT. I'd imagine they're the same. They're the same in the States and other countries too. Slight issue is with servicing that the people that do this to a really high standard are getting few and far between. So I wouldn't just take this to any repairer. I would Google, I'd find a specialist Rolleiflex repairer. Spend some money on it, it'll serve you for years. Really fantastic cameras. Hope that's useful. If you've got any questions, please stick them in the comments box below. I always respond when I can. Otherwise, please subscribe and like. I'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye bye.